Welcome to the Chaos Whispers of Healthcare, the podcast for busy healthcare leaders who are ready to get out of survival mode so they can focus on what matters most. This is where the burnout stops and the real talk starts. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Carter, and each week I sit down with healthcare innovators who get it. We will unpack the chaos, laugh through the hard stuff, and get you at least 2 practical tips you can use at work right away. If you're ready to clear the chaos and lead with impact, you've come to the right place. Let's jump in. Welcome to another episode of the Chaos Whispers of Healthcare podcast. Today's guest is an incredible female entrepreneur who I met recently but have immediately come to respect and admire. Lyndsey Cunningham is the founder and CEO of STR Solutions Consulting. She is a healthcare operations leader with over 15 years of experience helping hospitals, health systems, rural healthcare, and healthcare startups cut through operational chaos to drive results fast. Lyndsey specializes in turning strategy into action, leading high-stakes initiatives that improve efficiency, reduce costs, and elevate the patient and staff experience, all without adding fixed costs. In other words, she is a queen and fellow chaos whisperer, which might explain why we have bonded so quickly. Thank you for being here, Lyndsey.
Thank you so much for having me, Megan. It's such a pleasure to be here.
I'm so excited for this conversation. I think our listeners are going to get so much out of this. So let's start with your professional journey. Can you tell us about how you became a healthcare innovator?
Absolutely. So I started out right out of graduate school. I didn't know actually what I wanted to do. I majored in political science and I went to graduate school after that and had to pick a specialty. And I picked healthcare because I thought it would be interesting. And little did I know that once I got into that specialty, I would fall in love with it. And that I was kind of made to design and activate systems, which makes sense from the political science background. And once I got into healthcare, I kind of finally saw my purpose as to why that always interested me. So right out of graduate school, I went to work for a state hospital association where I had national exposure to the healthcare ecosystem and just learned a ton. And after that, went on to work for health systems where mostly I discovered I had this knack for running large, complex initiatives across healthcare organizations and really, really enjoyed that. I started to find that, few organizations have people who can not only design and co-create the strategy with teams, but also to execute it across complexity, across different silos, within organizations. So I kind of just took to that quickly. And that's mostly what I did for my entire career in corporate until I created my own company.
That's really cool that you were able to go straight out of school into a state healthcare association, because typically like healthcare leaders go from school to either a clinical or an operational, some sort of direct care role. And eventually over the years, they might make their way back to, professional organizations. You just like a rocket went straight into that. And to your point, got to see this healthcare system that's so complex from a really high, like 30,000 foot view, which you must have, were there any shocks? Like when you first got up there and you started learning how our healthcare system works, were there anything that surprised you about that?
Absolutely. I mean, studying healthcare economics, learning how our system works, learning how convoluted the system is. And then not only that, but then also when I got into healthcare to see how it actually happens, beyond the theory, beyond the study, to see how does this actually match up to what the books are telling us. It was an eye-opening moment, I would say. And, I always knew I wanted to serve in healthcare because I'm so passionate about this sacred profession that we share. But honestly, I never had the stomach for the clinical side. I just never had any desire to do anything clinical. But I've always viewed kind of my role in health systems as kind of healing our systems that serve the people, that serve the folks, providing that frontline clinical care. And that's always been, where I fit in best. And it takes all of us to make that system work.
It really does. Yeah. And to mirror what you just said, as a nurse, I had blinders on when I was a brand new graduate nurse. All I knew was the nursing, the techs, all I knew was the clinical. And I remember when I first went into a leadership, like a formal leadership role, and I started interacting with these other departments. And then in the executive, in the higher level roles, it's okay, now we're dealing with the whole community. and construction. And, all it, our healthcare system here takes hundreds of specialties, hundreds of perspectives, and diversity and thought leadership to make it work. Because to your point, it is so complex and chaotic. That's amazing. So, if I like to ask the guests as we start the episode, if you would tell us about maybe one of your most chaotic moments in healthcare leadership.
My goodness. Well, I think the COVID-19 pandemic was chaotic for all of us in so
Yeah,
many ways.
just a little, right?
Just a
Yeah.
little bit. I mean, at that time, I was within a regional health system, and not only was my team basically launching telemedicine overnight to get a lot of these patients access to their appointments because everything shut down. We were doing drive-through testing. And then the biggest thing I think was creating a drive-through vaccine clinic, which the teams that I essentially built out of an empty corporate parking lot in the middle of the pandemic. So that was leading, I think it was 33 teams and over 3,000 staff and volunteers to
Wow.
plan this vaccine drive-through in less than 90 days of planning because we had a very short runway between when the vaccine was arriving and when we had to start distribution. So we were marked as an official distribution center in the county, and so we planned very quickly. We had to work through, speaking of complexity, not only federal but state and then local parameters for receiving the vaccine, and then all the storage requirements for the vaccine, if you remember that, about the
Yeah.
freezing and the thawing. So it was incredibly complex, incredibly chaotic. But what stands out to me about that time was it was controlled chaos because we had such an amazing team behind this effort. And I think that's the difference between uncontrolled chaos and controlled chaos is when you have the right folks on the team, I think it just makes all the difference. And I think it's just still a time that we all look back on and as a highlight of our careers, honestly.
That's huge. I love that you use that example. I know there are some people, or when we talk about the pandemic, sometimes it's I don't want to talk about it anymore, and yet at the same time there were so many lessons and case studies from that. Similar to your story where I was when it first hit, we went from just a routine day-to-day meeting madness, like our normal thing, to we took all the meetings off the calendar. Everybody's laser focus was on one thing, which was keeping people safe. And the information changed every half hour to hour, especially in those first few weeks. You said federal, state level regulations. There were times when they didn't even know what the regulations were for what we had to do in the moment. When you run out of supplies or equipment, or you have staff who themselves are falling ill, and then you have, I don't know, the National Guard helping you manage the rush of human beings to your emergency room, that's ultimate chaos. And yet, at the same time, the leaders and the clinicians, they did what they had to do. So it's almost a lesson. And if we can take noise and some of these lower level things off their plate, the way they can care for people it's incredible. Our metrics, our quality, our safety, if we could just get these folks the time and space to focus on what they do best, which is caring for human beings, magic would happen overnight. But it took a crisis, a global crisis, to see that in action. So it proved to us we know we're capable of it. We know that if we remove certain barriers, like some of these routine things that we like to do, sometimes the bureaucracy that does more harm than good, people can do what they need to do. So very interesting. I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, and I think it was an interesting experiment in healthcare too at that time because it brought us that single point of focus, like you
Mhm.
mentioned. And I think before, we had what we have now, which is so many different areas to focus. We have so many different priorities and so much going on. And that time, we really whittled it down to keeping the hospital staffed and getting people the vaccine, so that we could keep our operations running. And I think that was just such a unique experiment in healthcare that we haven't seen again. And I don't know if we will ever see because we're back to juggling all these priorities. But that single point of focus really allowed us to get so much done during that time of need.
We talk about how to help leaders prioritize. And I talk about this concept of top 10. Like at any given time, the human brain can only hold so much information and projects and tasks, right? And yet we know that what's expected exceeds that. So, how do we help leaders say, okay, what are my top 10 priorities this week, this month, this quarter? So, sometimes it's getting those senior leaders to really pause and say, okay, guys, I know you've been asked to do 100 of these things. Here are the top 10. And just repeating that with each other and negotiating that. I think it helps them in the chaos, like we talk about, really focus on what they need to do. I love that your story, it sounds like you know exactly what our busy healthcare leaders are feeling in this country right now. And while you clearly help them solve so many pain points, I want to zero in on a specific barrier, which is trying to balance so many projects and tasks at work. At any given time, the average healthcare leader is sitting on dozens of committees. They're in back to back meetings. They're leading multiple large projects, and they watch their to do list grow a mile long without any time to execute on it and check those things off. So, can you talk to us about your experience with this as a pain point?
Yes. So I think as an entrepreneur, I definitely feel the pain point of multiple priorities. You go from having the resources of a corporation to basically having to do it all yourself or to outsource those functions. But when I was in corporate too, I definitely experienced this in those roles. And I remember at one time I had two senior level roles in a health system at the same time, just after the pandemic. I was overseeing patient safety for a 6 hospital, 150 clinic system. And then at the same time, I also was doing my other day job of overseeing ambulatory quality and process improvement for our ambulatory services and medical group. So that was a time when, I just had so much on my plate. And, we're seeing this more and more, I think, post COVID, where roles are being consolidated and, health systems are laying roles off. And so we're having to do more with less resources. But it really, it taught me a lot in doing those functions. I really got to get broader exposure to an area that I hadn't touched as much. And I learned so much. But I think what I learned that's probably most important is that if you don't stop to take care of yourself and set good boundaries, that you will be forced to make time for your health and your wellness, whether you like it or not.
That's
And
so
it taught
true.
me a hard lesson in burnout with that. But I'm still, very grateful for all those lessons that it taught me.
Yeah, that's powerful too. I love that you mentioned self-care, and I've shared my story with you before, but I walked away from my exec path as well when I basically was kind of forced to from a physical, mental, emotional standpoint. Took some time off, and when I was ready to re-enter the workforce, it was, okay, how do I want to show up differently? Just like you, what path do I want to take, to help people continue doing the sacred work of healing. So there are a lot of people who face that, and they're thinking through that probably as they're listening to this episode. So the message is, you're not alone and you're not weak. That's part of being a leader, unfortunately. Absolutely.
Well said.
Let's pivot to solutions and practical tips for balancing these insane workloads for these leaders. Can you talk to us about your 2x2 matrix as a solution for our newer leaders?
Yes. Oh my goodness. I love the 2x2 matrix for prioritization. It is my go-to that I use all the time, not only for myself, but also for my clients. Anytime I start to feel overwhelmed or when I see a client that's hitting the point of overwhelm, I whip out the 2x2 matrix. And this is just a simple grid with 4 lines, you've got your x-axis and your y-axis. And usually I use effort and impact as my two. But the beautiful thing about this tool is you can really use anything you want that's important to you. You can use cost, you can use time, whatever is important to what you're considering. And you can plot your priorities on this axis, on these axes. And pretty quickly you can see, what your quick wins are that's like low effort, high impact. And then you can also see your high effort, high impact, where you're like, maybe that's not the best use of my time and energy right now, or my team's energy right now. And so this is a tool that I use often and I love to share with others because it's just so simple. It takes 2 seconds to learn and you can use it right away. And I'll be sharing it too with you after this podcast so that everybody can have the link to that tool.
Love that. Love that. So, from a case study example, I'm thinking of like a busy nurse manager. Let's say they're in their role, they're in their first year or two, and they are overwhelmed with everyone and everything needing something from them. And they're all saying, I need it right now.
Mhm.
And taking the time, even if it's just 5 minutes, y'all, we're not talking about a day or a workshop. We're saying just real quick, what I love about this is, okay, I have this to do list. I have all these projects and committees. Before I leave and go home for the weekend, let me just jot out for next week which of these items are due next week from a time perspective, and which of these items are going to take a lot of my workload, time, and energy, and just organize it just a little bit. It doesn't have to be exact. You're just doing it for yourself, right? You're not turning it into anybody, but just to help your rattled brain that's stuck in that fight or flight mode just pause, take a moment. Let's look at our calendar for the next week, what's going on, and let's have just something of a plan. So when we walk back in on Monday, we're not just walking in automatic firefighter mode. We're walking in with, okay, I know that I have these 3 things I need to do today at a minimum. If I can just do 3 out of these 20 things today, whatever happens, I can handle it. It just gives you back a little bit of control. I love that. Love that.
Absolutely.
And I've personally witnessed your project management game, and it is truly impressive. Lyndsey is a pro, you guys. So tell the listeners about the different tools and methods you use as a female founder and solopreneur to manage your chaotic workloads and tasks.
Well, thank you. That's very kind. I
Yeah.
think, one thing I love for project management, I do have project management background in my career, plus, a lot of process improvement and all the things. But I think what I love using the most that keeps my business organized is Notion. And I don't know if you've heard of Notion, but it's similar, but very different also from Microsoft OneNote. When I was in corporate, we had the Microsoft suite of tools. And so OneNote was available to use, but I'm a very visual person. And the way OneNote's organized just doesn't quite cut it for me. But when I saw Notion come out, and I actually saw a fellow female entrepreneur using this, and she shared her template with me. So now I get to pay it forward and pass it on to you and your listeners,
Yes.
Megan, because you can add emojis, you can add icons for your things. I literally have a business page that I organize everything around, and everything has pages and buckets underneath it. And so it's so organized. I can dive into any topic that I need to for my business, and organize things, post ideas for LinkedIn, projects I'm working on, notes to jot down, and it's all organized from my desktop. The best thing too is there's also an app, and so you can access it on the go. And I promise this is not a sales promo for Notion. I'm not getting
Yeah.
any kind of sales kickback for this, but
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
do love that you can access it on the go, because sometimes, we get great ideas while, we're out, getting groceries, or, getting a coffee. And so I like that I can just access that from all the time. And it's great for both work organization and personal. I've done recipes with it. You can use it basically for anything. So
I love
highly
that.
recommend Notion.
That's amazing. I love it because when you said it's on the go, I do my best thinking when I'm away from my desk. I don't know why, but it's like when I need to lock in and focus, I am easily distracted. I can see my birds. I can see there's just too much going on. But when I'm in the car or if I'm, eating at a restaurant, I'll get this random flight of ideas. And so having something other than just my basic notes app, like in my smartphone, would be great because what I do currently is I'll just write it down in a random note and then I have to go and find it and organize it later, which I'm not
Right.
likely to do. So I'm kind of
Right.
all over the place with some of the brainstorming. So I love that you found a tool that works for you. And I think that's the message, whether it's Notion or another tool, folks, it's be open to experiment and try new things. If it can make your life easier, make it simpler on any level, it's probably ideal because you're living in a world of absolute chaos. Are there any other tools or software that you like that you might recommend for people with a lot of projects?
Yes, there's another one I really like called Trello. And I know a lot of folks are familiar with Trello. Some are, some aren't. And again, Notion, these are free tools that I'm mentioning too. So I have subscription overwhelm, so I don't like to subscribe to anything I don't have to. These are both free, which I love. So
Yeah.
Notion is totally free. Trello is also free, up to a certain, amount of boards that you can have. I actually only use one board, which is my to-do board. And it's in a Kanban style, which is, to do, doing, done, and everything kind of fits in a bucket, which I really like, again, because I'm very visual personally. But I really like being able to, it's this tactile thing of getting to move something to these different buckets, that you kind of get that dopamine hit of,
Oh, yeah.
when it moves to that bucket, or you get to physically check something off a checklist. It feels, just so good. And then at the end of the week, you get to see all the things that you've done. And sometimes I'll archive my, things that I got done into, a week by week tracker. It's great for teams too. I've actually done this with a team that I had in the past. They really wanted to use Trello as our team tracking software for our projects. And so we all used it, and it worked great. So that's another one that I really love. And
That's
then
cool.
honestly, my unsophisticated method is I still use Post-its all the time.
I do too.
If you could see my desk, I've got Post-its everywhere. The important ones make it onto my laptop. I've got them on my desk. That's my low tech option that I'm still working on digitizing everything, but
Yeah.
always a work in progress. You just can't replace that, good old sticky note.
I someone laughed at me at my last job. She gave me a hard time, and yes, I'm an old millennial. I'm like a zennial. I'm like Gen X slash millennial. And
Me
as
too.
tech savvy as I try to be, my Gen Z son makes fun of me all the time. But I would have different types of post-its. Like I'd have some of those longer, like note taking ones, and literally as I'm sitting in a meeting, I'm writing on it. And the younger person next to me is like, you can just put that in your computer. I'm like, but what if it crashes? What if it gets stolen? Like this is literally my brain that I'm trying to capture, and I need to be able to touch it and hold it. Let me be me. Don't judge me.
I feel
Do
you.
what
I'm the
works for
same
you.
way. I'm the
That's right.
same way.
That's right. I love it. Either way, whatever it is, I think the lesson is have a system. And if your current system isn't working, guys, there's so many different options out there that are low lift. You don't need to go through some big orientation or a workshop. Just try it,
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I personally use Asana for my projects and tasks so I can kind of plan out each week and how I use my time. Which of those tools that you mentioned is your favorite and why?
I think Notion is probably my favorite. I think it's the most versatile. I use it the most. I use it every single day, kind of how you use Asana. And there's so many, I mean, I haven't even scratched the surface of the
Right.
capabilities. There are so many templates that you can get access to. So I think, whatever you're looking at it for, whether it's for project management, whether it's for home stuff and recipes, or managing your business or managing a healthcare team, I think you can do so many things with it. So I think I would say Notion for that reason.
Love that. I need to really check that out. On that same note, something I'm recommending to a lot of my clients. And so for listeners, if you feel overwhelmed like I do sometimes with all of these options, right? We go to work and they not only do they upgrade regularly our electronic health record, but they'll upgrade our Microsoft Office and they'll add new tools to Teams and Copilot to Outlook. And it's hard to have time to actually sit and learn how to really use it in a way that makes sense for you and your workflow. So a best practice I want to share with the group too is monthly lunch and learns where you and your peers, whether it's managers, directors, whoever, y'all just get together, bring your lunch, and have someone in the room kind of present how they optimize or how they use a specific tool. So, my previous organization, we did this and we had one nurse manager who was like the queen of OneNote. She knew how to use it at a level our IT folks didn't know. And so we're all just eating and we're snacking, having a good time, hanging out, no pressure. And she's just literally pulled up on the projector screen, her laptop, how she uses it and why. And the light bulbs went off. And then the next month, we actually had the IT guy come in and show us an AI tool that was added onto Teams and talked about, hey, if you're late to a meeting, it can catch you up. Instead of just doing like the generic orientation or the generic thing, like you have people from your own organization who know what you need and how to use it specific to your projects and tasks. And you actually get to hang out with people that you normally don't get to see and spend time with. And God forbid you actually eat something in the day, right? So it's kind of a win-win. So whatever tools, kind of like what Lyndsey's describing, you can accomplish this in like a monthly lunch and learn style gathering with your group. So I love that.
Absolutely. Lunch and learns are the best.
Yeah, I love those. So if I'm a listener and I'm tuning into this episode and I happen to be at a breaking point as a healthcare leader, I'm drowning so much at work that I can't begin to think of where to start prioritizing my time or work. What are the initial two steps you would recommend for me?
Hmm. That is such a good question. I think the first place I would start, honestly, with that level of overwhelm is that 2 by 2 matrix that we talked about. I think it's just so powerful in terms of just prioritizing your quick wins, getting those off your plate, and then kind of looking at the rest that falls into that middle space, and then kind of putting those, do them laters off to the side. I think that helps tremendously in the midst of overwhelm. The other thing I would say is really helpful is a task tracker. And Megan, you and I have talked about 3 Ws. I think we're both big fans of this who's
Yes.
going to do what and by when
Yep.
structure. And so I have a task tracker I use. It's ridiculously simple and it just covers those 3 things. Who's going to do what and by when. And I found that this is a game changer for teams and also for leaders. To basically just track those follow-ups, those things that people are peppering you with questions to do that you need to go back and look into, that you need to ask somebody about. It's so easy to lose those things if you don't have a standard way of documenting. So you could use this either for yourself as your own to-dos, But also, I think it's a really helpful tool for teams. And I really love to incorporate this into wherever the team's kind of hub is, whether it's a huddle board, whether it's the nurses station, wherever it is, so that the whole team can get their hands on it and use it and can add to it and fill it in and complete it. I think it's such a powerful tool when people get engaged that I really love to recommend that for overwhelmed teams and for leaders, either for
Yeah.
personal or team use.
That's great. I love that. Yeah, 3 W's. So who, what, when, if you're listening. And you can use this, and as Lyndsey described, in a variety of ways, but how many times, here's a case study. How many times do you as a leader initiate a question, right? Like you have a question, you reach out to somebody in a different department, and then you move on with your day. And then 2 weeks later, you randomly think of that again. Oh, so-and-so didn't get back to me. It's the literal double work of having to remember who you're supposed to follow up with, who owes you something, information or whatever. And it drives people crazy. It's a huge pain point for a lot of my clients. So you can use this for your meetings to replace your meeting minutes. You can use it for yourself, but just having a who, what, and when. So who owes me the deliverable? What is that deliverable? And when is it due? But making sure that you share that same document with your team, with those people. If you start and end your conversation with deliverables, you'll find that people tend to show up differently, and they know that you're going to ask them where their deliverable is. They tend to prioritize those tasks a little bit better. They don't want to get caught off guard or be the person who didn't do what they were supposed to do. And it really reduces the mental fatigue of who owes me what and when. Did I send that email? How long has it been? Gets rid of all of that. So that's great. Great advice, Lyndsey. Love that. So much incredible practicality today. I know I'm going to be putting these approaches into place myself ASAP. Lyndsey, let's pivot and talk about joy and humor in life, because I view it as an antidote to some of the frustration and overwhelm that we feel in healthcare leadership. We spend a lot of time focusing on what's broken and how it holds us back, but we also need to create space in our lives for joy. So where are you getting laughter in your life right now?
I love this question. So I think, I do the scrolling on Instagram, the cute dog videos or animal videos where
Yeah.
they're like wearing a funny hat or,
Yeah.
the most ridiculous things. I think that just gives me the breaks during the day that I need, just of
Yeah.
some levity, when things get too serious. Another funny thing that my partner and I do is we rewatch our favorite comedy series.
Yeah.
We've got a couple of them, so we really love Ted Lasso.
Oh,
That's kind of the
yes.
all-time favorite.
So good.
Um, and then also Shrinking, we love. We're on that one right now. And I think like rewatching a series, like we don't get as sucked into wanting to binge watch because we already know what's going to happen. So we can manage our time because we're not
Yeah.
dying to know what happens next. But
Right.
we can still hear all the jokes again and our favorite funny parts of these series. And so
Yeah.
it's just a really nice way to unwind without getting too sucked into something and wanting to know what's next, but just to have the laughs and get to have those laughs. I think laughing is so important. I don't think we
Yes.
laugh enough as we get older, and especially as we get into these professions where there's, literally life and death situations every
Right.
single day. I
Yeah.
think laughing is so important. So thank you for asking that question. And I want to encourage
Yeah.
everybody to go, do something that makes them laugh today.
Yeah. I love that example. I'm obsessed with Shrinking, obsessed with Harrison Ford and all those actors, the brilliant writing. I actually follow that whole crew on Instagram, and you get to see the behind the scenes, and you can tell they really have chemistry and genuinely care about each other. And I feel like that comes through in the final product when you're actually watching it. It also
Yeah,
makes me cry because it's such a good, heartwarming, but it's a good kind of cry.
it
Ted
is.
Lasso is fantastic too. We talked about in our first episode, the righteous gemstones. And I don't know if you and your partner are into that sort of comedy, but it is so ridiculous and over the top. It is absolutely hilarious. So highly recommend that.
I'm going to write
Um,
that one down.
yeah, it's I mean, you need to have zero standards for this is all about making you laugh and just following these characters' story. But yeah, I love those examples. And yeah, TikTok and Instagram, I can get pretty lost pretty quickly. I think I've trained the algorithm to show me either old lady gardening bird videos or ridiculous cutesy like animal videos. It's
Yeah.
interesting because my son, being a different generation, what makes him laugh is so different. He'll show me some of his TikTok videos that make him laugh, and I don't get it, but he's like crying laughing. I mean, he just loves it. So I think it's great to find whatever makes you laugh. There's no need to justify it, but make time for that. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So fun. Lyndsey, thank you so much for your time and your brilliance on the podcast today. As a reminder to our listeners, these practical tips will be included in the show notes. You can find them. So they were the 2x2 matrix, the 3 W's, and then she listed out several task or project tools that I'll add in there for you as well. If our audience wants to connect with you further, Lyndsey, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I would love to connect with folks on LinkedIn. I think, healthcare to me, I think is the ultimate team sport. So, the more we can connect with one another, support each other, inspire one another, I think that's a great way to build community. And so please connect with me on LinkedIn. You can find me under Lyndsey Cunningham, and that's Lyndsey Cunningham. You can also find me in STR Solutions Consulting there as well, or at strsolutions.pro.
Perfect. And I'll include a direct link to her LinkedIn and to her company website as well in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time today, friend. It was great
Thank
to
you
see
so
your
much,
face and
Megan.
have a great conversation.
Yeah, you as well. I so enjoyed it. Thanks so much for having me.
You bet. Have a good one.
You too.
Thanks. Thanks for joining us on the Chaos Whispers of Healthcare. If today's episode resonated with you, please be sure to follow this podcast, rate, and leave a review on your favorite platform. I'm Dr. Megan Carter, and I will be back next week with more real talk, fresh strategies, and guests who are redefining what it means to lead with impact. Want to keep the conversation going? Be sure to connect with me on LinkedIn and download free tools and resources from my website. Both links are in the show notes. Let's heal this broken healthcare system together, one day at a time.